My dear Earthlings, you may not know me. I am the universe, and it's time for us to get to know each other. After all, I'm 14 billion years old now, and how old do you think you are? 5, 10, 20, 50, 100? No, you are 14 billion years old too. You are part of me. You've always been part of me from the very beginning. That's why I'm going to tell you a story about me, which is a story about you too. Now, when you were born in your human form, you started out as a tiny, tiny speck buried in the dark inside your mother. But you couldn't stay small. You grew and grew. On a very special day, your birthday, you were born into the light. Well, I, too, the universe, had a very special day when I was born. But there was no light for me to be born into. I, too, started out as a tiny, tiny speck, smaller than a piece of dust under your bed. But even though I was so tiny, I was filled with wild and dazzling dreams and brilliant colors, bright yellow, molten red, and piercing blue. Creatures in my dreams too, like insects alighting on flowers, reptiles basking on hot rocks in the sun, and birds swooping down on their prey. And I saw you too, gazing at stars. Could all these things happen? I wonder. Could I roar as a lion? Could I purr as a kitten? Could I know feelings like love and sadness and wonder? Could all these things happen? I decided to take the very first step, and I blew up to a cabbage-sized universe. I was only this big. Everything that would ever be was squished inside me when I was only this big. I was a baby universe. Then I really went for it. I blew to the size of a galaxy. And I kept on growing. I had to find the right speed for a universe to grow, you know. If I grew just a little bit too slowly, my own gravity would have overpowered me and crushed me into nothingness. Or if I grew just a little bit too quickly, I would have blown apart and disappeared into nothingness. But everything was just right. Now, that's not to say that things were peaceful, mind you. Oh, no. There was chaos everywhere, glowing bolts of energy everywhere. And then the bolts of energy shrank into tiny, tiny, tiny things. They were tiny particles, the very first stuff. These tiny particles were rampaging around in the energy. I kept on growing, and it got a little cooler. And that's when some of those particles came together, and they formed something amazing. They formed the very first element, the very first atoms. The very first protons and electrons came together to form hydrogen. hydrogen. Yes, number 1 on the periodic table. I do go in order, you know. Well, I kept on growing, and now I was filled with hydrogen clouds everywhere. And then a force began to go to work, a force called gravity. Everything that's stuff has gravity. So all the little particles had a gravitational pull, and they began to pull together, get tighter, denser, tighter, and then flared into the very first stars. Yes, stars were lighting up for the very first time. The very first time. Yes, once upon a time there were no stars. And then there were stars. Well, the stars, too, had a gravitational pull, and they liked to gather together in galaxies or star cities. In one very special galaxy for you called the Milky Way, and in one arm of that Milky Way, there was a colossal star, a mother star that was very special for you. And she took that hydrogen and she made bunches, and she baked it, and she baked it, and she baked it, and she baked it, and she baked it. And she turned it into lots of new elements like carbon that would one day make your brain, like oxygen that you would breathe, and like calcium that would make your bones strong and hard. But for your sun and your whole solar system to be born, your mother star had to die. She blew herself apart in a massive supernova, blasting her stardust off into space. Now all the little bits of calcium, all the little bits of carbon, little bits of oxygen, and all the other elements were floating and floating through space. And then that force went to work again, gravity, and it pulled together all those little bits of things. They came together, and began to spin slowly in the form of a disc. And the center of the disc flared into your sun, and all the planets formed in the outer parts of the disc. Well, that third planet from the sun, rambunctious young planet, I say, your Earth, covered with volcanoes, spewing out gases that went up and formed the atmosphere, spewing out moisture that went up and formed clouds. And then Earth began to cool, and it started to rain. The great rain. For 1,000,000 years, it rained and rained and rained and covered your Earth with oceans. And underneath the ocean, there were rips in the ocean floor. That's where little hydrogen bubbles were coming up. Remember hydrogen? My very first element, there it was again, right there in the ocean floor. Would this be a good place for life to begin to twitch and multiply? Well, that story will have to wait for another day, my dear Earthlings. Until then, I send you my very best from the cosmos. It's true. I am you, and you are me.